women in law have always been a sort of challenge to the stereotypes. Because, of course, first of all, we all grew up with the idea of Portia, and in order to be the lawyer person, the advocate who wins the case, she has to disguise herself as a man. And so the general stereotype is that women, in order to be successful at the bar, had to basically don male clothing and had to don male ways of operating. And so certainly when I started at the bar, the stereotype of the successful woman was certainly not one with an accent. She certainly wasn't one from a working class background. I came from a very wonderful, a wonderful family of working class people in the south side of Glasgow. It was a Catholic working class extended family. I had really good parents. I remember as a child, a woman coming to my mother, and she was experiencing domestic violence. She lived in the tenement that we lived in, and she was the daughter. She was married to the son of a family that lived there, and she was being battered. And my mother, scrabbled around and found her the money to give her a fare to go back to her parents, she and her baby. And the girl was black and blue. And I remember I was only probably about 6 or 7, but I remember watching this and watching my mother comforting her and say to her, "You mustn't put up with this." I remember other people coming to my mother with those sort of problems. And so although I didn't see anything horrible at home, because my parents really were very happily committed to each other, I saw bad stuff. And it made me realise that, of course, people felt that the law was not for them, and they kept away from the law. They tried to solve the problems in other ways. And so, for me, the law is a way of dealing with so many of the problems that often blight people's lives. I went to the bar and I got the shock of my life, because I was with people who were so alien to me, because they were so much not from my background, and they were almost all young men, and they were almost all young men who'd gone to very expensive public schools. And so it was a very different world. It was like stepping into an Evelyn Waugh novel or something. I had to bludgeon people to give me a pupillage. It was hard. And if I hadn't been bloody minded, I don't think it would have happened. But I was determined to do it. I was not going to go back to Glasgow with my tail between my legs, saying that I hadn't been able to make a go of it. So I was very persistent. I was in a set of chambers where there were three members of Parliament, and I started working for the Law Centre movement, because this was the 70s and exciting things were happening, and I wanted to do work for community law centres. I was a working class girl, and I wanted law for people like the people I came from. And when I started doing work on that and campaigning around it, and said to the clerks in chambers as a pupil, they want to instruct me. The lawyers in chambers came and said to me, "You mustn't mix law and politics." It was fine to be a Conservative Member of Parliament, but it was not fine to be wanting to work for the Law Centre movement. Well, I left, and with a group of other people, set up a new set of chambers. There were just 6 of us, 3 men and 3 women. It was the first time ever there was a set of chambers where it was parity. And we were all just in our mid-20s. I was 24. And the others were all sort of more or less that kind of age. And we set up this mini set of chambers, and we did work for the Law Centre movement and for battered women's refuges, which Chiswick Women's Aid had just started. And we worked for Law Centre firms, legal aid firms that were private practice. But we did very interesting, quite low-level work where we saw what happened to the poor. But I particularly was alert to what was happening to women. I used to write regularly in women's magazines or in the newspapers about the way in which women were experiencing violence or experiencing being a victim of rape, and what happened when they came to court. I started writing about that stuff. It culminated in a book that I wrote in the early 90s called Eve Was Framed. But before that, I was writing quite regularly. And then, of course, I created the drama series Blind Justice to show what it was like being a woman and what was happening politically at the time. It wasn't just about women's issues. But it was I recognised that one of the best ways was to kind of bypass the bar and speak directly to the general public, and to talk about law and the institution. And open, and shine a light on it. And yes, I did criticise the judges, because at that time you had judges saying things like, that women shouldn't wear miniskirts if they didn't, expect to be sexually assaulted, and that women were contributory negligent because they, of how they behaved and because they were behaving sexily or whatever. Judges said the most extraordinary things. And occasionally they still do, but by and large, I was arguing for judicial training to understand what a violation felt like to a woman, what that meant to women. I remember on one occasion raising the issue of sexual harassment and in the workplace and so on, and I remember a man at the bar saying to me, why would anyone sexually harass you? I had said that a particular person who'd been the head of my chambers was well known for sexually harassing people. And he said, why would anybody sexually harass you? You're not attractive enough to be sexually harassed. As if it was a completely wrong understanding of sexual harassment, because of course it's about an abuse of power. It's not about pursuing somebody just because you've got the hots for them. It's actually about another kind of dynamic. It's about humiliating and being abusive towards someone. A total failure of understanding about what sexual harassment was about. That I wasn't pretty enough to be sexually harassed, therefore I must be making it up. But that was the sort of attitude that people had. I had a wonderful male mentor, and we should always remember that sometimes your role model isn't necessarily a person of your own gender. And I was very lucky that when I was in my 20s, a very famous American lawyer saw me in court and kind of took me up. And he became like a sort of extra father to me. And my dad had just died, and he and his wife became very close to me. And I used to see him in the Supreme Court of the United States. I used to see the work that he did. He was a great civil liberties lawyer, a great constitutional lawyer in America. And he used to come and he'd sit at the back of the court when I was doing cases, and he would say to me, "You got too angry." And he really kind of taught me how to be a better lawyer and to be more strategic. I made a decision quite early on that I was not going to be sitting on the bench. If you're going to be a judge, then you can't be the person that I am. I'm somebody I'm a social reformer. I want to see change in society. I want there to be real equality for women. I don't want to see racism, and I don't want it impacting on the law. And so it means that the legal profession itself has to engage with those issues. And so that's a different kind of role, and it's not one that a judge can play as easily. And so I've gone down a different road. I've had a wonderful life at the bar, but then I got the chance of being in the House of Lords and seeing how legislation is passed and seeing law in the making. And I'm involved also in the world of education. I'm seeing a new generation of lawyers coming into being. But, I do think that, yes, there's a way in which it's about putting your experience to good use. But I also made choices which meant that I didn't take often cases that took me abroad and, which were on offer at a time when it could have been interesting and exciting, because I wanted to be around my kids. So you do find that you balance it. And sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you feel, did I get that one right? Did I make that right choice? I've been so lucky in my life, but I always say to young people, male and female, say yes, and say yes to other things outside of the law, because it makes you a better lawyer. I think it's still problematic for people from ethnic minorities. And you often get that thing, which is, why would people apply to a set of chambers if they don't see other people like themselves? And so, if you look at the big commercial sets, I'm not sure that you see so many black faces. The places where real money is made. But there are lots of good lawyers coming in who are from ethnic minorities, and many of them fabulous young black women. young Asian women too. I mean, just really great women coming to the law. So yes, I'm optimistic. I feel thrilled, and it's all gone mainstream, and it's no longer about having to rattle the cage in the same way. And now I am. I'm almost a member of the establishment. I keep one foot out, but I'm pretty much in there still creating waves.